Hello everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio. Today I'm sharing with you a speed up voiceover version of the Art Joy of Sharing live stream show today on Monday, April 27th. We've been doing the live show twice a week during the quarantine, and we will continue to do that until the quarantine is lifted. So Mondays and Thursdays at 10:30 Central, 8:30 Pacific time in the United States. So what are we doing today? Masterboards. And I worked on a couple different ones, but I'm only going to show you one because I finished it and I made a couple projects with it. The other one isn't finished yet, so I figured just making the video with the one would be fine. I started out with some cardstock, which isn't usually what I do. Usually I use a heavier paper like a 300-pound watercolor paper or something like that. But I wanted this craft color. I wanted to do something that I don't normally do, which is to work in neutrals, which is not my normal style. I'm usually real bright and lots of colors. And I really just thought neutrals was my thing I wanted to do today. So this is 8.5 by 11. 80-pound weight craft colored cardstock. It's called confetti cardstock because it has little flecks in it. I don't know. I think it might have been made by Nina paper. I'm not sure if they still have it, but any craft paper or even packaging material would work great for this. I used my Liquitex matte gel medium to glue down some different text papers. Some of it's vintage. A piece of it is scrapbook paper that has text on it. There's some music that's been stained with either tea or coffee. Old dictionary page, page from someone writing from 1942. I found that there was a date on that, but these are vintage papers. There's also some paper from a tea bag. You just take the used tea out and spread it out, and it's got an interesting color. And I wanted to stay with all those type of colors. The next thing I did was to kind of integrate it a little bit by using some finger painting, using a Titan buff color of acrylic and just applying it around the edges of some of the papers with my finger. Then I wanted to do some large scale mark making, and I got out some golden high flow carbon black. This is a thin paint that has a high pigment load, and I used a scruffy brush that's like for stenciling, like one of those boar bristle brushes, and I just barely tipped the tips right into the fluid paint, and then I tried to use very large motions, very open arm large motions to make some marks. Then the next thing, I still had some of that Titan buff paint, so I brayered a little bit of that on to the background. It kind of makes a interesting mark if you brayer it. A brayer is a soft rubber roller thing, and I used my 2-inch brayer and just brayered some of that on. So what is a masterboard? It's all about layers and making a background and then cutting it up and using it. So once you have one made, you can even scan it with your computer and save it as a file so that you can use it again and again. But it's just fun to cut them up and make them into ATCs or cards or whatever smaller project, a cover for a small journal, whatever you want to do, you can take this piece, cut it into smaller pieces, and make something out of it. And you'll see that I made a card front and an ATC, and then I have a lot of pieces left over that I will use again on some other project. It's just a fun thing to do. It's working in large scale, but then when you cut them down into smaller pieces, they become very magical, and you'll see as I cut them up how that changes it. The next layer I put on was some tissue paper. I don't know where this came from, but some of it had some leopard print on it, on the tissue paper. And then it also had some other weird stuff like little pearls and sequins in it. It was like someone had taken a photo of maybe a pile of fashion stuff and then made it into tissue paper. Probably somebody gave it to me. I'm not sure where it came from. So I put that layer because it was tissue paper. I used a fluid matte medium to apply that because that works better with thin, fragile papers. So then I wanted to do some stenciling. This stencil is called Circles in the Sand, I think. I will put a link to this stencil and any other products that I used below in the description box so that you can find them if you want them. Stencil is new to me. I just got it, and I think it's really cool. I wanted to use it. It seemed to be the right thing to go with this Masterboard. So I started out with some titanium buff acrylic paint on my palette, and I'm using a stencil brush that looks like a toothbrush. It's actually designed for makeup application, but it works really great for stenciling. Put a few of the circles here and there, and then I wanted to use this Sedona color from Dina Wakely. It's a heavy body acrylic paint, but I didn't want it quite as dark as it is, so I mixed some of the titanium buff with the Sedona color and made kind of almost a quinacridone gold, it turns out. But I thought that was a good color to put on there because there was some of that tea stained paper and coffee stained paper and vintage papers that have that sort of color on them, kind of a rusty goldish color. And then I ended up putting a few circles with the full strength color as well because I found that it wasn't as jarring on the background as I thought it was going to be. So once I was done with all that stenciling, I decided what I really need to do was do some transparent glazing because that can really bring things together and warm things up. And so I got out some transparent nickel, transparent yellow iron oxide, and some transparent nickel azel gold. Those are both golden high flow paints again. Those are the thin paint with the high pigment load because it's a professional paint, but they are designed to be transparent. So when I painted them over the background, it just kind of brought everything together and it made it it made a glow to the whole masterboard, which I really thought was cool. Then I took some of the Dina Wakely Ancient colored paint. It's kind of a bronze metallic paint, and I did some splatters over the background just to get a little bit of shimmery stuff on there because I like it. It's a really cool color. It's not copper, which is one of my favorites. It's not gold. It's just somewhere in between. So once that was all dried up, I decided to start cutting it up. So there is an event coming up for Art Joy of Sharing art community on Facebook where we're going to be doing ATCs each day. So that's, 30 ATCs. So I figured I would make some of them into ATC sizes. An ATC is 3.5 by 2.5, and it is designed, it's artist trading card is what ATC stands for. So they were originally designed so that you could trade them with other artists at conventions and trade shows and things like that. People still use them that way. They're 3.5 by 2.5 inches, and sometimes I like to cut mine 2.25 by 3.25 so that I can mount them on a background because I like to have a frame around the edge. And the one that I finished today does have the frame. Then you can also, of course, cut these into card fronts, and I cut this 4 inches by 5.25 inches for the standard A2 size envelope card, which is an invitation envelope size. And then I cut a piece of 8.5 by 11 black cardstock in half to make a card by folding it over. And then that gives me a little bit of a border around. And I used some manila cardstock, which just happened to be on my desk as a tag, shipping tag on my desk, to stamp an image to put on my card. And that's from the stamp set called In the Wild, which is a discontinued stamp set from Stampin' Up, but I do see there's some of them on eBay, so I'll put a link below the video where you can find this stamp set. It's got a lot of cute animals in a very refreshing style. It's sad that so many things get discontinued that, I mean, I guess they need to continue to make new stuff all the time so that people still buy from the companies, but sometimes there's something that's really cool that you just wish you could get at a later date. This one's probably been discontinued for 10 years maybe. I don't even know, a long time probably. So then I tore one edge to make it more interesting. I tore the edge of my little cat background and the black cardstock that I put around the back. I put some twine around it, glued it all down. And then these are the two that I cut into 2¼ by 3¼ so that I could mount them on a 2½ by 3½ inch ATC background. And I figured I would make one of them with the same stamp set. This is the giraffe from the stamp set, and stamped that. Then I cut half of it and tore half of it to make it more interesting. Little weird stuff that I do. And I put that on along with a little black scrap that was there on my desk, which I tore. Then I got out my watercolor palette and I used some sienna colored watercolor to just kind of give some shadows and some color to my giraffe and to the edge and around the edges to make a shadow. It's just something I like to do. I figured it needed a little bit of color, and there's a lot of that kind of color in the background too, with that Sedona paint that was diluted. Then I decided to work on my card, I guess. I don't know. I was going back and forth. Oh, I decided to make a little bit more mark making on there using a pencil, making some X's with a pencil. It just kind of adds my own hand to the image, something that's not mechanically made, but actually made by my hand. And then I blended out that pencil a little bit. It's a water-soluble graphite, so I blended it out a little bit with a water brush. I did end up going over it with a black pencil later, which doesn't appear on the video because it was later. I'm like, it's just those marks just aren't quite dark enough, and I decided to use my Stabilo All pencil. I also used some of that graphite pencil around the edge of the cat, and then I stamped the word hello on there with some archival black ink, and I also brought in some of the watercolor again and added a little bit of an ochre color to the cat as well, which is similar to something in the background. And then for the little ATC, I put a sticker on there from one of Tim Holt's sticker packs. So that is it for me for today. We'll be live again on Thursday over at the Art Joy of Sharing channel. And of course, there'll be a speed through of whatever we make on Thursday here on my channel, and probably something on Wednesday and something on the weekend. I don't know. That's it for me. Thanks. Bye-bye.